Hi, I'm Andrew Capehart. I'm Director of the Adult Protective Services Technical Assistance Resource Center. Welcome to our presentation, the APS Field Guide, Quick Answers for Field Staff, being presented by Courtney Fox, Reza Zainalpour, and Stacy Tolson from Oklahoma Human Services. A little bit about the presentation. The Field Guide is a quick access point for field staff to get answers to many questions, including appropriate questions to ask during interviews for different allegations, how to document interviews within the Oklahoma APS computer system, the steps staff need to follow when obtaining a guardianship, and many others. Developed with the assistance of supervisors from different areas of the state, APS Leadership, and technology experts, the APS Field Guide is a tool intended to help standardize the investigatory process for new hires and seasoned staff and free up supervisors' time for developing staff, going to the field with staff, and working on community partner relationships. So it's a very comprehensive presentation that we have today, and we're very lucky to have our folks from Oklahoma Human Services. Before we get started, just a few things I want to go over. A quick disclaimer. This webinar was created by the Adult Protective Services Technical Assistance Resource Center, or APS TARC, administered by WRMA Incorporated under contract number 140D0424F1178 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Community Living, Administration on Aging. The views expressed in this webinar do not necessarily reflect the views of policies of the Administration for Community Living or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The models and information provided during this webinar do not serve as official guidance to comply with any part of the APS final rule or APS regulations. All information provided is done so for informational purposes only. And I think I get faster every single time that I read that. This presentation is hosted by the APS TARC. As I said, we work with states to enhance the effectiveness of APS programs by supporting federal, state, and local partners' use of data and analytics. You may be familiar with the National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System, which we administer. Applying research and evaluation to practice, encouraging the use of innovative practices and strategies, and providing APS programs individualized technical assistance. So please do reach out to us at any time if you have any questions whatsoever that we can help you with. Today's presentation is being recorded without a live audience. If you have any questions after viewing the recording, please reach out to the APS TARC on our website. And the contact information we'll display at the end of this webinar is another method you can use to reach out to us. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn things over to our folks at Human Services, and I believe we're going to start with Courtney. Courtney, the floor is yours.
Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at. Yes, this is the APS Field Guide, Quick Answers for Field Staff. Andy, if you could advance the slide for me. As Andy said, I am Courtney Fox. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from the University of Oklahoma. Go OU, Boomer Sooner. I am the program administrator, or one of them, for Community Living, Aging, and Protective Services here at Oklahoma Human Services. And Adult Protective Services is under that division. I have 9 years experience in adult protective services, and as of June 1st, which is just in a couple days for me, I will actually have 10 years here at Oklahoma Human Services in adult protective services. I am a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. I also, here at Community Living, Aging, and Protective Services, I wear many hats. One of my hats is I'm the administrator for the long-term care investigations team, and I also am the technical assistant. I provide that for all of our Community Living, Aging, and Protective Services staff. And then if you'll advance the slide, Andy, we'll have Reza introduce himself.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I am Reza Zainalpour. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Living, Aging, and Protective Services. I oversee the APS program as well as the Grants and Coalitions team. My bachelor's is in Business and Administration, and I've been with the state for actually just turned 5 years last month. So it's been a pretty fun, bumpy ride. But I do have 15 years experience with continuous improvement, and I am a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Next slide, and Stacy.
Good morning or afternoon, as Courtney said. I am Stacy Tolson, and I have a Bachelor of Arts in Human Services Counseling from East Central University, Oklahoma, and just recently completed my Master of Science in Human Resource Leadership Development from Louisiana State. And I'll say go Tigers to the OU Sooner fan there. I am the program field representative for Adult Protective Services. I have 20 years experience in adult protective services, which has spanned anywhere from being field staff to supervisor to my most recent position as program field representative. I am the system administrator for AVA, which is our computer system for our coursework. I provide technical assistance for all APS staff, which truthfully, this is probably the job I've enjoyed most that I have had so far. So I look forward to spending the morning with you. I will let you go to the next slide. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to look at our roadmap for learning for this webinar. Reza will start us out by discussing and giving us an introduction to standard work, and then I will take over from there and give you a little bit of a history of how we train our new hires here in Oklahoma. Then I will go over how supervisors spend their time before we implemented standard work. I will also talk about Oklahoma's workload woes, and then I will hand it over to Stacy at that point, and Stacy will talk about how we created the field guide here in Oklahoma. She will also give you a demo of our field guide, and then after that, we will talk about what Oklahoma has gained by implementing a field guide. So if you'll advance the slide.
All right. So what is standard work, right? It's more than just a library of all of the work that we do in a step-by-step fashion, right? It's so much more than that. It is a lean tool that documents the best known current way that we perform a task, but it also promotes consistency, efficiency, and safety. It's a foundation for training, improvement, and accountability, and it should continue to evolve as new methods are discovered. Again, it's the best current way that we do it, not I told you to do it and this is what you follow, right? Because we've all had those kind of supervisors in the past that says, because I said so, or the steps say so. Whenever we know why we do something, it becomes so much more powerful, right? Standard work is a foundational lean tool. And it, again, like I said, it's the current best, safest is a key piece there. And then most efficient way we know how to perform a specific task. Now, we talk about things like best, safest, and then efficient is also something we consider. But whenever we're thinking about standard work or any sort of tool or countermeasure whenever we're doing something, efficiency is something we seek, but it's not the reason why we do improvement. And I think that's important to note. We do things to make things easier and better for our staff, for the clients we serve, and the outcomes we try to achieve. But we do easier and better first, and then faster and cheaper become byproducts of why we're doing continuous improvement. And again, standard work is a continuous improvement tool. Next slide, please. And there we go. All right, so right here, I know you see kind of a busy slide right in front of you with that. That's a value stream map. But before we talk about that, I want you to know lean kind of is a focus on waste reduction, right? Waste is a topic all on its own, but waste is things that don't necessarily add value to the process. They're things that we typically have to do, but when we target removal of waste in our processes, we typically make things easier and better and faster and cheaper. Whenever we look at a value stream helps us analyze the big picture. A lot of times we only see what's right in front of us, but whenever we consider the bigger picture, we can make really targeted improvements as opposed to just improvement for improvement's sake. And that's where you see continuous improvement right there, a Kaizen. Kaizen it's a Japanese word for change for the better, but a Kaizen is a targeted rapid improvement event focused on where the biggest waste is in a product, typically your bottlenecks or something like that. Lean is also known for pull systems, just-in-time system, because you don't want to batch too much work or have too much work sitting on the shelf. And then 5S methodology is another tool that can be used to help to help help with problem solving, right? 5S is about setting things in order and trying to reduce the search time that you need for setting something up in order to move on with your process. Next slide, please. So in Oklahoma, we use most of Oklahoma uses the DMAIC process, which stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control. But ultimately, it's about, like I said before, about problem solving. DMAIC does have a big focus on defect reduction. And as you can see here, the framework is define, measure, analyze, improve, control. But what we try to go for here is with data-driven decision making, which utilizes all the data that we have to give us statistical analysis to help better solve problems, not just guess when we're trying to solve problems. You also look at the process capability, like, is our process capable of handling all the work that we have in a timely fashion in order to be able to achieve the outcomes we need to achieve? And then lastly, there you see standard deviation. Standard deviation is about reducing variation. And it's super important, but whenever you're looking at APS processes, a lot of times you're not looking at things to a 6 Sigma level, which is 3.4 defects per million opportunities for a defect to occur. So I say that just so you have a little bit of baseline about standard deviation, but ultimately this is all about problem solving, right? And problem solving is something we learned whenever we were in grade school, whenever we did scientific problem solving, right? We wanted to experiment to do something, we had a hypothesis, and we went through the whole scientific discovery, the whole scientific method. The DMAIC is something very similar to that, and depending on where you are, you might have your own framework, right? So some folks might use 5 Whys as a framework for root cause analysis, which is part of problem solving. I personally grew up in the continuous improvement world using the practical problem solving model, which is an 8-step model, but they're all basically the same thing, and they all focus on how do we solve problems. So next slide, please. And so whenever we're looking about solving problems, because again, standard work is a tool used to solve a problem. It is not just something we do. Whenever we're told to do something and we don't have any context why we do it, how likely is the thing that we propose to be used last, right? It only lasts as long as we force it, as opposed to, you see each of these things here, consistency and quality control, right? That ensures that our products or services are delivered with consistent quality, reducing variation and errors. Communicating something like that, as opposed to communicating because I said so, ensures better adoption of whatever tools you're using in order to help improve your processes. And again, standard work is a tool that we use to help reduce variation, to help how we train, to help how we do the things that we do on a regular basis. So all of these things here are reasons why we do the things that we do, and we're able to communicate that to our team members who deserve more than because I said so, or that's the way we've always done it. All right, so we have a little video for you, so I'm gonna kick it over to Andy real quick to start the video, and then we'll talk about it for a short time.
All right, and I will play the video now.
Any sense? Zari ruined it on purpose. He knows how to make one.
What's up, the internet? You know what? I'm hungry. I could really go for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Do you guys think you can write down some instructions and teach me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Yeah.
Then do it.
I knew we were gonna do this. I heard Dad talking to Mom.
Choke yourself on my hand. Sometimes they do what you tell them.
I'm done.
Step 1. Get 2 pieces of bread out. Got 'em. Get a butter knife and get some PB. Take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
No, Dad, with the peanut butter.
I'm just doing what it says. It says take one piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
Hold on.
Get some jelly, rub it on the other half of the bread.
No, Dad, open the jelly.
Well, it doesn't say to do that. Put the breads together on top of each other. Take a big bite. This doesn't taste like a peanut butter jelly sandwich. Fail.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I had to make it extremely specific.
Oh, good. I'm starving. Take 2 pieces of white bread out of the bag. Take the lid off the jar of peanut butter. Get a butter knife and stick it inside of the peanut butter jar. With the knife, scoop a bit of peanut butter out of the...
That means like a lot.
A bit means a lot?
In my world.
Spread your scoop of peanut butter onto one of your pieces of bread with a knife. All right. There we go.
You're doing better than before, though.
Open the jelly jar. Squeeze it onto the other piece of bread.
Nope.
Done. Closer. Get 2 pieces bread. Get some peanut butter. Take the peanut butter knife. Open the peanut butter. Put the knife in the PB. Get some jelly. Open the jelly.
No.
Squirt the jelly onto the bread.
You're supposed to...
Take the butter knife with the peanut butter on it. Wipe it all over the piece of bread that's blank. Take the butter knife, rub the jelly all over the piece of bread.
Oh, he's doing better. Oh.
It says all over. Put the 2 pieces on top of each other.
This isn't how I meant.
Take 2 pieces of white bread out of the bag. Take the lid off the jar of peanut butter. Get a butter knife and stick it inside of the peanut butter jar. With the knife, scoop some of the peanut butter out of the inside of the jar. Spread your scoop of peanut butter onto one of your pieces of bread with a knife.
No.
Squeeze some jelly onto the other piece of bread. Spread the jelly on the bread with the butter knife. Put your 2 pieces of bread, peanut butter and jelly sides together. Done. Get 2 pieces of bread. Get some peanut butter. Get some jelly. Open the peanut butter. Get a butter knife. Put the butter knife in the peanut butter. Take the butter knife out of the peanut butter.
You did it wrong. No.
Take 1 piece of bread and take the butter knife that has the peanut butter on it and spread it all over the top of the piece of bread.
Dad,
That's the top.
I mean the sides.
Squirt some on another piece of bread. Take the butter knife, rub it all over the top of the piece of bread.
I quit. You're not making any sense. Sorry, ruined it on purpose. He knows how to make one. I know, Evan.
Let's go ahead and pause.
It's the game that we're playing.
That's a brilliant example.
Yeah, absolutely it is, right? So I mean, I showed that video, 1, because it's really funny, and 2 is because it really helps us be able to put standard work in perspective. You know, how many times have you created a 1-pager for your team or a client and it didn't go the way you thought it would, right? How many of you have felt like the kids in that video? Better yet, how many of you, switching those roles around, how many of you have been given a piece of a 1-pager and you felt like the adult and like it's not clear? And it's really easy, especially when thinking about standard work, to pass blame to another party whenever we're doing something. So the main thing that we got to do whenever we're looking at standard work, again, just because we do it once and it's not successful, we really have to look at, how do we make it successful? Why isn't it being used? And how do we get the outcomes that we need? Again, it's about problem solving. And it's really easy, again, it's really easy to get mad at a piece of standard work because it's an inanimate object. But whenever we're trying to do the right thing, I think the video does a great job pointing out how it can still be confusing. And it's on us as the people that are going to be creating the standard work to, again, think on, how do I make sure it gets used? How do I make sure that it's clear? So please, please, please just consider that as you move through. Because again, problem solving, it's all about the process and the outcomes and not seeking to blame people. All right, I'm going to kick it back over to Courtney, I think.
Yes.
You're not.
And I am going to talk about training new hires and how we do it or used to do it here in Oklahoma, our approach. So if you'll go ahead and advance the slide. So we have New Worker Academy and then we have field training. So I'm assuming it's going to be a little bit similar in your states, but in Oklahoma, our APS program, we have only 3 New Worker Academies each year. And our training team currently only consists of 2 trainers. And so they are responsible for training at New Worker Academy all of our new staff. Sometimes, and I'm assuming it's probably similar in your states, but there could be a large gap between when a new hire starts and when they actually start and go to their first day of New Worker Academy. Also, New Worker Academy is more about training new staff in the policies and procedures, whereas field training, and if you'll go ahead and click, Andy, there's a second part to this little slide. Yeah. This is compared to field training. Field training is a little bit different, and our field training is mostly done by our supervisors or our lead workers. So our lead workers and supervisors are responsible for training the new staff. Here in Oklahoma, we have 18 total supervisory teams, and that also includes 1 guardianship team who takes care of the guardianships mainly in the northeastern part of our state. And then we also have our long-term care investigations team who cover the entire state. Oklahoma, if you don't realize, we're made up of mostly rural. We have 2 urban areas, which is Oklahoma City and Tulsa, but the rest of the state's mostly rural. Our supervisors and lead workers train our staff in the nuances of field work. The typical new hire, what we have found here in Oklahoma, takes about 19 months. A new hire takes about 19 months to be fully able to start carrying a caseload. And so that's a long period of time to where a new hire isn't able to necessarily help with the big caseloads because they're not able to carry a full one yet. Also, we have found, since our supervisors and lead workers are the ones who are training new hires in the nuances of field work, there was a high variation in the processes. So somebody in Oklahoma City could be doing it completely different than somebody out in Woodward, Oklahoma, which is out in the Panhandle area. Our aim here in Oklahoma was to help people become more successful sooner so that they could hop in and start carrying that caseload, because 19 months is a long time. But we weren't doing a very good job at it here in Oklahoma is what we found. So if you'll go ahead and advance the slide. So talking about before we implemented standard work and a standard process across the entire state. For our supervisors, more time was spent fielding phone calls, messages, emails from new staff, but not only new staff, but also our seasoned staff. And they were calling and emailing our supervisors asking about simple processes that in leadership's mind, staff should have already have known the answer to. So our supervisors were spending time coaching new as well as seasoned staff on how to proceed during investigations. That made less time for our supervisors to do some of the important things that we felt were important, like following around and shadowing their staff in the field to actually see what they were doing in the field. It left less time for our supervisors to actually read out and approve cases, so it was taking longer to get our cases closed and sent on to the district attorney. The supervisors had less time to mentor their staff. So there was less time spent developing staff to level up within our division. And we also found that our supervisors did not have a lot of time to develop their relationships with the community partners. So our community partners maybe had a misunderstanding of what APS was doing, or they didn't think we were doing anything at all in some instances, because our supervisors didn't have the time to go out and make those relationships and talk with our community partners. And so I think, Andy, if you'll click the little button, I have a little question for everybody. Basically, why do you think all the time was spent over here on the left side of the screen? Basically, without a clear path, workers are always going to go back to the supervisors for direction. Our typical response for staff when they would call and ask questions or send a text message to ask their supervisor a question, our typical supervisor's response at the time was, well, what does policy say? How many times do your supervisors in your states fall back on that and say, what does policy say? I can recall when I was a field worker, I had my supervisor as well as our district director ask me that several times. And I thought to myself, I don't know what policy says because I'm having a hard time interpreting what it says. And I am calling you because I need assistance. And so that's mainly why all the time was spent over on the left side for our supervisors. All right, if you'll go ahead and advance the slide. So I want you all to think about how your state handles standard work currently. And if you are anything like Oklahoma used to be, this next slide is going to sound familiar to you. So go ahead and advance that slide. So previously in Oklahoma, we were looking at several one-pagers. As Reza mentioned earlier, one-pagers, that was what we were doing here in Oklahoma. They were also stored in various places. So some people were storing those one-pagers in Teams. Some people had them stored on their computer. Some people were storing them on SharePoint. And so depending on where you had those one-pagers stored, your one-pager could be outdated. So there was outdated information being passed around to the workers within the state. We also had unwritten best practices. So when somebody would say, well, that's a best practice, in my head, when I was a field worker, I always thought, well, how was I supposed to know that's a best practice? Because it's not stated anywhere. It was unwritten. And like I said previously, we were always falling back on, well, what does policy say? So if you'll advance that slide, this is looking a little crazy. And I admit this was our old standard work library. Yes, staff had access to it from our computer, our documentation system. So from AVA, they had access to this where they would click a link and it would take them here. So that was cool that they had it readily at their hands and at their fingertips. But as you can see, it's a little overwhelming. Several one-pagers. And when you clicked on those one-pagers, it's a Word document with screenshots. So you click on the one-pager, and then on the left side of the screen, you see it would give you the step and a picture, the step and a picture. And at the time when we had this, I was really impressed by it. I thought that this was a great way for us to have our standard work. I felt like it was organized, and it could have been mainly because me and one other person were responsible and created all of these one-pagers over a Christmas break, actually. And so I was like, yeah, we're doing really good. We have all these steps down on paper. This should be great for staff. And then we come to realize staff, it was not useful for staff because it's hard to follow along with. So it would be hard to search. So if you're looking for how to enter an interview in AVA and do your documentation, you would have to find adding an interview, click the link, and then scroll down. And by the way, when you click the link, it opens in a new, it opens in a Word document. And so then when you're done looking at that one pager, you'd have to go back to the library, scroll through, and find what you're looking for next. And so staff weren't really using it because it was time consuming for them and it wasn't very helpful. And so at this point, we're looking at how can we make this better for staff? And we didn't know exactly how we wanted to make it better. We just knew it wasn't working and it needed to be better. And one of the reasons we knew it needed to be better, if you will go ahead and advance the slide, it needed to be better because, as everyone is noticing, our referral numbers started to grow and grow, and staff didn't have a lot of time to be, going through a standard work library that looked like that, trying to find out how they do a certain process. Staff didn't have the time, and we didn't want them to necessarily have to spend their time going through something like that. We want them out in the field helping the vulnerable adults and getting them the services they need. And so with our referral numbers growing, and I'll talk about that for a second if you'll advance the slide. So in Oklahoma, let's go back to fiscal year 21. For federal fiscal year 21, which runs from October 1 through September 30th, federal fiscal year 21, we had 24,532 referrals come in that year. The next fiscal year, we had 26,190 referrals. Fiscal year 23, we had 29,551. And then for federal fiscal year 24, which just ended September 30th, 2024, we had 32,158 intakes. And so if you'll click the button, Andy, if you're fast at the math, you already know that's a 31% increase of referrals since federal fiscal year 21. So Oklahoma has had a pretty steep increase in our referral numbers. And at the time, when this is happening, we're looking at this thinking, how are we going to keep up? How are we going to keep up with these referral numbers? And we didn't know. So we start brainstorming. So if you'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Oklahoma leadership, we decided to discuss this, and we decided how we were going to handle the increase in referral numbers. We wanted to balance the workload across the state. So I'm guessing in other states you see similar cases, but we had higher caseloads in the metro areas versus the rural areas. So in the metro areas, we had some staff who were carrying a caseload of upwards of 30 cases a month. And we knew that wasn't sustainable for those folks. We would have new hires come in and see the caseloads of their coworkers in those areas, and those new hires would look at that and think, how am I ever going to carry a caseload of 30? And we would lose some people like that. They would look at that and think, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm going to go find a different job. So our solution was to balance the workload across the state, maybe give some of those service or some of our cases, caseloads that were in the metro areas out to some of the rural areas that didn't have as high of a caseload. And so we found, if you'll click the button, Andy, we found it's going to be hard to balance the workload when no one is doing investigations in the same manner, because you have rural areas who are doing something a little bit different in their investigations than the metro areas where we didn't have that cohesiveness to be able to balance the workload when everyone was doing it differently. And so I'm going to hand it over to Stacy Tolson now to talk about what Oklahoma did to solve some of these issues that we were seeing.
So if you'll go ahead and advance to the next slide. Hopefully you're still here with us. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the creation of our field guide. As Courtney was saying, we were tired of trying to make that peanut butter and jelly sandwich with no real clear instructions or guidance. So when I came into this job, I was given the task of creating a field guide. And you might notice that we kind of have interchanged the words field guide and standard work. A little bit about that was it began as a desire to offer just the clear steps of how do you do a service case? How do you do an investigation? But as we began to put it together, it's become so much more than that. And we'll kind of look at that as we go through it here. The real original goal was that if I had a case in the southeastern part of Oklahoma and that person moved to the northwestern part, that case could be transferred, that person could pick it up and know right away what to do with it because everyone was following the same steps. So the first question was, who should be involved? And if we can go to the next slide, please. We started out with supervisors, and one of the key things that we did on collecting supervisors to help with this was that we chose supervisors from each of the different districts so that each district would be represented, their way of doing things would be brought to the table. And then we had the guardianship program field representatives and again, that was by district, and they were the ones who would be able to tell us how their guardianships were handled. Then we had long-term care investigation people at the table because we wanted them to be represented. We had leadership involved. We had the tech gurus involved. So we put together a team that we felt like was a good representation across the state so that every voice could be heard. And if you'll go on to the next slide, please. The next thing we discovered was there were some folks who knew tech, but did we really know what we were doing trying to put together a true website approach? And so the team effort continued. We partnered with OU, where they put us in touch with a business process engineer and a web designer to take the information that we were creating and put it out there in a truly useful way. So that was the team that was put together, and then the process began. Next slide. The first process was, it's kind of like if you've ever heard, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. If you think about trying to put all of the steps of what we do into a simple, logical process, it's a little overwhelming. So we started out just choosing one bit of the job. We started with service cases. And so we focused on that. We brought in the experts for service cases and said, okay, what steps do we take? What do we need to know to be able to complete a service case? So we logged the steps. We began talking about, which step goes where, is this enough detail, those kind of things. Once our supervisors agreed, yes, this looks great, this is how we would want a service case to be worked. And keep in mind, the whole time we were doing this, we were watching policy, we were watching instruction to staff that's out there, and all of those one-page how to do it items, trying to incorporate everything so that we covered everything, all of the best practices, all of those things that we just kind of throw out there randomly at folks. It was all going to be logged in the steps. We put that together. We then presented it to leadership. We presented it to other folks out in the field, made sure that we had covered what we needed to, and that it sounded correct to everyone, that everyone agreed, yes, this is how it should be done. We then handed it off to another tech guru who was able to put it into a flow chart and show all the steps through the flow chart. And then once the flow chart was completed, we then submitted it to OU to the designers. So that was the process we took for each part of the jobs that were represented. The investigations, the guardianships, the long-term care, the screening process. Everything is going to be covered through the field guide. Next slide, please. The things that we have to take into consideration in the field guide was that it's a work in progress. Oftentimes I'll say, when we complete this, we'll be completed, knowing that the field guide's never going to be completed. There's always going to be changes. There's always going to be more efficient processes that can be put in place, identified. So it's just a work in progress. The next thing, as we all know, you need buy-in on any kind of change with staff. And so we began talking early on about how great this field guide was going to be, what a tool it was going to be for them before it was ever even put out there, to get them to believing this was going to be something they were going to need, something that they would want to utilize. And so once it came out and we were able to put it out there, people were excited about it. They really felt relieved that they now have a one-stop to get all the answers that they need. And so it was really exciting for them. Then the engagement opportunity of it. In a moment, I'm going to show you the field guide, and you'll see at the bottom of every page, we have a section that says, what can be improved on this? What is missing from this? What idea do you have about this? So they have some feedback that they can provide us at all times on the field guide. So they have a little bit of ownership to it. Not only did they have representation at the table that created it, but they still continue to have some ownership in it. And then it's a training tool that really is useful for supervisors to be able to point new staff to, but also even to seasoned staff. I've had seasoned staff come and tell me, this is really great. I'm able to go in here and refresh my knowledge on different areas. So it's an amazing training tool. And then as they continue to use it, they gain proficiency over time in their job, which is one of the best things we can provide to our staff. So the next thing I would like to do on the next slide, please, is go ahead and share my screen and just take you into the field guide. This is the field guide as we have it set up. If you go to our site here, apsfieldguide.oucpm.org, you will come on to our home page. The thing that I love about our homepage is it gives you options of what you need to see. We have it broken down into our basics, service cases, investigations, the LTCI group, guardianship, risk needs assessment, service planning, allegations, and then questions. So when you go to the field guide, you don't have to shuffle through a bunch of pages to get what you need. If you have a question about the service case steps, you can come down and go straight to service case steps, which will then walk you through the steps, and it has screenshots from our computer system so that you know exactly how to enter the information. But also it goes beyond that, and this is where it became a field guide beyond just service standard work, is that we're not just telling you how to put it into the system, we're also going to tell you the steps you need to take. What do you need to review before you begin working on this case? We go through all the different things, and you'll notice everything in here has a link so that you're not going through stuff you already know. There are multiple links to items so that you only are looking at what you really came here to see, what you needed to know. We go through how to plan your field visits. So it became more than just, we want a standard work in our computer system. It was, we want to help you with every step that you have to take to be the best specialist you can be. So once you go through these, you're then able to come over here. If you know what you're wanting to do, you have all of the things off the front page, and you can just click straight into those. So if you go from service case to wanting service planning, you can go straight into, if I have a service plan with capacity, my client has capacity, what do I need to do? What are the questions that I need to be able to answer? So there's everything that a specialist needs in here. And then you have the see a mistake on this page, which is where we have the engagement with them. And it's their opportunity to give us the information that they feel like needs to be changed or included. So the field guide has so many aspects to helping our staff. And when we come back through here, one of the things that I love that a lot of staff have told me really helps is our questions section. I want to go over it just a little bit because a lot of times when you hear questions, you're thinking, oh, it's kind of a frequently asked questions. This actually is a question section to help them with their interviews. And it goes over open-ended questions, questions for resistant alleged perpetrators. I mean, it's just ideas of how to ask the various questions that they need to be able to do their job. The other thing that we have is we have our allegations linked here. We have caretaker abuse, all of the different allegations. When you click into those, you'll see that we have the things to consider while investigating it. We have the definition of it. And then we have examples of appropriate findings narratives for them to write up at the end of their investigation. So really, there's not an aspect of any of our staff's jobs that are not covered in the field guide. They're all easily able to access the field guide. We do have the field guide linked in our AVA system, which earlier I said was our computer system. They're able to easily go from there. They can also bookmark this site. So it's easily out there. We also, one of the really great things, as Courtney mentioned earlier, we have a high amount of rural workers. So we have it that down here at the bottom, you can generate and download a PDF of the field guide. So there are so many things in the field guide that we've just continued to develop on. As I said earlier, it's always going to be a work in progress, but what we have right now put together really has been extremely useful to our staff. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're going to go on to our next slide. So thank you. In the development of the field guide and putting it out there for staff to utilize, we had some gains that we immediately saw from it. First off, we have staff that now have autonomy. They're able to go to this field guide, they're able to find the answers they need and go and do their work without having to wait on a supervisor to respond what the next step is. And as they began to get familiar with that and comfortable with that, they developed a mastery of their job. And we all know once you begin to feel like you're mastering what you're doing, that develops that confidence that's so crucial. And then with the confidence, of course, becomes success. They're successful in completing their work timely. They're successful in managing their caseload because they're not always waiting on an answer from someone. And of course, that success then rolls over to success for our clients because we're better able to meet their needs. And if you'll go on to the next slide, we'll look at the gains that the supervisors gained from this. As Courtney said earlier, a lot of our supervisors' time was spent answering phone calls, messages, emails, in-person discussions of what do I do next? A lot of staffing over things that were not required, they just weren't known. And so now they have the field guide out there to be able to go to. Supervisors now have time to develop their teams, to work on what does my team need to be the best that it can be, to help manage the caseloads of their team. They also are able to go out in the field and shadow workers and see how the specialists are really relating to the clients. And we all know how important community partners are. And Courtney alluded earlier to the fact that community partners sometimes felt like we weren't doing our job because they weren't hearing from the supervisors. They weren't hearing from the supervisors because supervisors simply didn't have time to reach out and develop those relationships that are so crucial. Now they have that time to build on those relationships. And all of that, of course, equals less stress for our supervisors, which is always a tremendous thing. So those were the gains that we saw from the supervisors. If we go to the next slide, we're going to see a gain that we really didn't anticipate. As we went through the field guide, I mentioned earlier, we brought in all sorts of people. And so that was engaging all the different areas of our staff. And then for our staff to hear, hey, what do you think about this? And them to feel empowered to speak into something that was being created like this, they began opening up. And one of the great things that came out of this was we had a staff member look at our policy and say, is there a way that we can link the policy put links in so that we can easily access the actual policy we need. And in fact, we just had never thought of that. No one had ever mentioned it. And so we went in, we put links in. Staff were so appreciative of that. They're like, I can finally understand policy. I can find exactly what I need without having to flip through 15 other pages. I can find the instruction to staff that's tied to that policy because it was all linked. We'd never thought of that. And had they not been able to see their voice being heard through the field guide process, I don't know that that idea would have ever come about. And so as we began mentioning that idea came from the field and we wanted to hear from the field, we even put in a portion of the field guide to hear back from the field on the "do you see a mistake" link. All of a sudden, everyone started saying, well, what if we could do this? What about this? And ideas just started increasingly coming in. And it was really great because a lot of our staff have great ideas, but sometimes they just don't feel like they're heard on the ideas. And through the field guide process, they learned that not only are they heard, it's very much valued. So that was one of the really cool things that came through this process that we did not expect. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope, if you want to go on to the next slide, that you have learned a little bit about our process and that you can utilize it.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and thank you to all of our speakers today from the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. I think I speak for anybody who's watching this and saying it's very informative. If anyone is thinking about replicating this sort of stuff, I think they've got a really good head start by watching this. So here's the contact information for all of our speakers today. Are there any parting thoughts from any of our speakers? No pressure, but
yeah, no, I had three. So one of the key things, and Stacy touched on this, was the psychological aspects of success, right? Whenever people want to achieve success, and success begets more success, but you got to think about what that does for the organization too. It contributes to less turnover, it contributes to better morale, it contributes to higher productivity, and it contributes to better problem solving because people feel heard and things like that. Again, when people feel successful, they feel more empowered to do the things that they already want to do. Again, the work that we do is purposeful, so helping them feel purposeful keeps them engaged in the work and therefore doing more, which again, we can then challenge the standard work. And that's the second point, which is how do we ensure that we utilize the standard work? One key thing that you need to consider, especially from a supervisor perspective, when a question comes in about the work, whenever I get a call about the work, if I want to help the person, but if I answer a question, I don't want to answer the same question again. Not in a bad way. I want to help somebody, but we've already solved that problem and your mind needs to go on to something more. So whenever there's questions about the work, and especially as it relates to what should be in the field guide, a response to that is, hey, let's go look at the field guide together and see if there's an opportunity for clarity, rework, something to improve the standard work. And it puts more confidence in the field guide. And it shows that whenever somebody brings something up, people are listening and there's an opportunity for it to improve. And then the last thing I want to bring up, I know that what we just went over is a lot, but whenever I started this and I started talking about standard work, people told me left, right, up, down, sideways, you can't process map everything. You can't have steps for everything. And I tend to disagree with that statement. What is hard is it's hard to get started. And that's the key thing. Once you get started, you can start imagining more and more and more. And I know a lot of the things that come up in standard work will well, in this area, it has to be like this. In this area, it has to be like this. There is ways to progress in the standard work to where you can account for a different area or a different process. It's like, if you are here, do this step. And then if not here, do this step. So that's the same way to progress through it. So it really is simple. It does take time, but it really, really does help. So again, I just wanted to leave with those parting thoughts.
Thanks, Reza. And your first point was something that comes back to what Stacy said. It helps build confidence. You know, APS is not an easy job. And if you're starting out in the field and you're brand new and you haven't done anything like that before, it can be intimidating. And I think having everything laid out for you about how you do things can be very helpful and build confidence and be able to do your job well. So any other parting thoughts from our speakers? If there are none, thanks for watching today. Here's how you can reach out to the APS Technical Assistance Resource Center. You've got our website here, our email address. If you want to reach out to us about a National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System issue, you've got that email address as well. And then all of our socials, please do follow us. Thanks for watching today so much. And thank you again to our presenters. Really good information. Oklahoma does some really cool, interesting stuff. And we appreciate you being here today. So thanks so much. Hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
All right, and that is the